anticlimactic.
Okay, I'm here. This is a last minute stream. Well, it's not really last minute because I said I was going to do it yesterday, but it's a last minute in that I just scheduled the stream a minute ago. So, anyways, um, I want to talk about vehicle losses, and I'm fully aware that almost everyone is going to listen to this as a VOD and not as a live stream. So I'm just gonna get into it. And if anybody wants to come and ask me questions in the current somehow, I don't know how this is gonna work. I feel like I'm talking into a time machine, and it's confusing. Anyways, uh, hello, last one. Anyways, so I want to talk about vehicle losses and how I calculate them and what numbers I have for them and all of these things because I don't know, I feel like I should. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is how we get the vehicle losses. Um, so the way we get them is by mostly going through Telegram, which is in itself a flaw because there are other sources of information beyond Telegram, but we don't really have the time to go through them. Like we would probably need like dedicated people to go through the other sources. Speaking of which, if someone wants to do that for us, it'd be cool. But anyways, like there's like VK, um, which is a source that we don't really look at that often, like very little actually. But they do have a lot of vehicle losses there posted. And sometimes we see them on Telegram, like they'll say like these are vehicle losses that we found on VK, and here's a list of them, and then we'll get the list that way. But we are not scouring VK on our own, so that's one flaw. Another flaw is that there's also Instagram, which I look at Instagram a bit. I look at it more than I look at VK for sure, but I don't look at it enough. So um, so Instagram is a another place where we could get vehicle losses, and we do occasionally. We probably, I mean, I don't have the stat off the top of my head, but we probably get between 5 and 20 from Instagram per week, something like that. I'm not sure, but we do get some from Instagram too. So and then there's sources on Twitter that we do get some stuff from Twitter. Typically, I hate using Twitter as a source because Twitter is like the most ephemeral of all of the social medias. It tweets are deleted pretty frequently. Accounts get suspended and deleted pretty frequently, and so I really don't like using Twitter as a source. And even if we find something on Twitter, I will search for a non-Twitter source of it just so that when I have it in my database, when I go back to look at the thing, it still exists because telegrams almost never disappear. You can change the name of your telegram channel, which is obnoxious, by the way. But you can do that. But typically, telegrams don't disappear that often unless it's very targeted. uh, and Russian accounts do these sorts of targeted misinformation campaigns where they will go back in time and delete a huge amount of footage and then re-upload it as if it's new. Which is also why you have to screenshot everything to keep screenshots of the stuff so that when they upload a video, you can say, hey, this video is from 9 months ago. Why are you doing this? Anyways, so we have a question, which is totally unrelated. Uh, uh, what is your question? It is, should we focus more on the Leopard 1 deliveries over the Leopard 2? Um, I don't know. I guess Leopard 1 comes in bigger numbers. Neither of them come in enough numbers. So unless you're getting Grace on board, tank is really, neither of them is going to be enough. Ukraine really needs like thousands of vehicles, and we're talking like hundreds of Leopards. There just aren't enough Leopards. You would you would need to start having to manufacture like probably between 50 and 100 per month to, and nobody's doing that. I don't think they're even making one a month. So, anyways, that's a completely different story. So anyway, those are the measurement flaws that I have for the vehicles. Is that we're using mostly Telegram and also a little bit of Twitter. We're not looking at VK anywhere near enough. We really should be looking at VK, but looking at VK is much more specialized. You kind of have to be an expert of VK to do VK, and that's why I don't do it. And it's also very time consuming because you need to know the right people, etc. And I don't. So I know there are people who specialize in only covering VK, and I value them, and I'm not one of them. But anyways, so I wanted to throw those caveats out because it's important. There are also other caveats, such as not everything gets captured on video, and and not all videos come out. Probably, I mean, I don't know the stats on the ratios of these things, but I would imagine probably fewer than 50% of losses get on camera. I mean, I think Oryx has stated that they think like 80% get on camera. That might be true like eventually. Like eventually every like probably 80% gets footage. But I don't work in eventually. I work in much smaller time spans because I don't have the time or honestly the interest to go back and scan every single post for vehicles we missed like 3 months ago. Like that's not what I do. Um,
Andrew,
yeah.
um, sorry, it's Exit. Hi. I was just wondering if you could maybe mention a little bit about the time frame for stuff that goes on your map and how that affects. You kind of got into it there, but I maybe expand a little bit on how that might affect count numbers.
Oh yeah. So I mostly only care about things that give information on the current state of the battlefield. So that's kind of it makes the timeline kind of ambiguous. So like if we're talking about an area of the front that barely changes, then the amount of time is much larger. Like if we're talking about area of the front, like I don't know, like around like Kupiansk or whatever, like these areas where there aren't many changes. Like I'm willing to take videos from like 3 months ago and be like, whatever. Like the front line has moved probably like 50 meters since then. It's like whatever. But in areas where there's really active combat, sometimes I don't even care about things that happened 2 days ago because so much has changed since then. Like I know the front line has moved, and I'll just ignore it. Like even relatively new stuff. So it's kind of ambiguous. It's not like a firm rule. What the general thing here is that I only really care about things that tell me about the front line and and stuff that doesn't, or not necessarily a front line, but things that are relevant to the actual war today. Um, so like blowing up artillery pieces or whatever. That's kind of the filter on what gets counted because and I want to make clear that counting the vehicles is very much uh, not even a secondary, it's like a tertiary byproduct of making the map. So the primary part of making the map is finding sources that tell us something about what's going on. and then we like try to analyze it and geolocate it and all of that, and like the making the counting the vehicles is like very far down the priority list. So there's a lot of stuff that gets filtered out before we ever get to the video to the vehicles. Um, so like when I see footage, it's like here's a here's a vehicle that we forgot to count like from April. I'm like, I don't care. Like whatever. It's not my thing. Like I'm not counting every single vehicle. That's not what I do. Like there's like other people who do that, and I'm not one of them. So I just want to throw like all these caveats out there before I talk about the stats I have, because the stats I have are fundamentally influenced by all of these things. Okay, so I have some numbers over the past 2 months. I very much like sticking to the past 2 months for for two reasons. The first reason is that there were 2 days in September when I was like so overwhelmed I could not deal with vehicles. And like those 2 days have like there were days like maybe you encounter this in your life when you have to do like a month's worth of stuff in like an afternoon. That's what those days were like. It was like, what if we publish 5,000 brand new videos today? And I was like, please don't. Please don't do that. But they did. And those days, I just never got around to doing vehicle stuff for those 2 days in September. So for that reason, I don't really like looking at September stats because it makes me sad because there's like 2 days missing. And we didn't start um, tracking everything and the level of detail and specificity that we're using now until the middle of July. Uh, so before July, we were tracking lots of stuff, but it was not at this level. It was a much reduced level before July. So my very detailed stats, they are basically the middle of July, August, September, October, November, and September is missing 2 days. So that's why I like focusing on the last 2 months, just because the data is relatively clean and complete. Uh, Anyways, so these are some stats from our data. That is this is just for November. Okay. And I'll show some stats that I have. I don't want to show all the stats. Just for because there's so many caveats. I'm constantly afraid of people misusing stuff. But anyways, uh so I guess it's kind of interesting if we show October too. So I'll get October too. This might take a second, but uh because I need to generate it, etc. Okay, so here's October and November. Now, the, the interesting thing here is clearly that there was the huge Russian offensive in October, and it began. Uh, See, the offensive really it depends on who you talk to. Ukraine will tell you that the offensive started on October 1st, but we didn't really start seeing videos and data until the 10th. And I honestly think a lot, maybe not all, but I think a solid chunk of everything from the 10th was actually from the previous 9 days. But anyways, we kind of got it all on the 10th, or a lot of it was retroactively added to the 10th as videos were slowly released over the course of a few weeks. In fact, I got another video today from October that I haven't even put into these numbers yet. So there's even more vehicles from October. It's still coming out. It's great. Anyways, so we see this huge spike in vehicles from this assault. Um, and we've all seen this assault. Like, yeah, they attacked from like every angle, basically, towards Avdiivka, especially Krasnohorivka, but also towards Sevierna and Pervomaisk and what else? I think that was pretty much it. And they attacked Novomykolivka. So they attacked everywhere basically, and they suffered really catastrophic losses. And then the following few days, they were continuing to assault, but nowhere near the scale of the original assault. And then there's kind of a day off. Everybody just said, you know what, we had a day off. They took a day off, and then went back to some assaults, and it kind of slowly tapered off until they finally did this other second giant push, and then it kind of tapered off, and they did a third giant push, and then it tapered off. And now it's been kind of constant, except for this one day in at the end of October, right? So these are some basic trending type stats that I have. So and then we can go to November, which is on a different scale. I want to keep in mind that this scale is different. I don't know why. Like I tried to export this as one thing. Oh, that's why. That's why. I need to change my data range uh, to 209. Okay, this chart is going to be harder to read, but this is what happens when you put 60 data points in a chart instead of 30. Um, okay, so we had this big push in October. There were these kind of repeated pushes after that, and in most of November, we're kind of down to a baseline. Now, this baseline, I actually think this baseline might be a little bit higher than the previous baseline, and I do kind of have stats on that, so uh, I can show some of these stats in a second. Let's see, I will go to with the previous caveat that that several days are missing in September, so keep that in mind. Uh, I have these other stats which are somewhat interesting. These are kind of daily stats. So this is August and September. These are the average for the days, right? So, and this is for destroyed and damaged vehicles only. The total, and keep in mind that the total does not necessarily equal the destroyed and damaged for reasons of math. Um, anyways, so the what I want to draw your attention to is that Russia was losing about 2 tanks per day over that time period. Destroyed, 2 destroyed per day. Now, if I go to November, I'll go to November in a second. We'll see what November says. Uh, November is at 2.3 per day. Oops. 2.3 per day for November. So November is above the baseline that they had established. And by a baseline, what I've found is that the Russians they seem to have a certain kind of minimum losses that they take, regardless of their behavior. And then every once in a while, they'll do these offensives that go above that baseline. But this baseline, it like they basically never go below the baseline. So the baseline that I've found for Russia personally, in my stats, is about 2 tanks per day. Is kind of the baseline. So right now they're at 2.3, so they're zero point 0.3 above the baseline. And then prior in that big attack month, they were at, what was it like? I can't remember. What was the number? I forgot. Uh, anyways, I should look at the chat and see if people are chatting. They're not. Okay. So, am I making sense, Exit? Did I describe things differently?
You are making sense, and I'm in a car wash, so it's really loud. So I'm going to keep muting.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, um, these are the stats for October. So October is 3.1 tanks per day. So if 2 is the baseline and 3 was their average for a month where they lost like a catastrophic number of tanks, just keep that in mind. So like 2 is kind of normal and 3 is like, oh my god. It's like and then right now they're at like 2.3. So they're above average, but not crazy right now. And I've seen a lot of people, they kind of look at the stats of the current losses for Russia, and they say things like the trend is going down, like their trend of losses are going down, which is, I guess, technically true, but it's going down from a ridiculous peak of insanity down to their baseline. So that's just interesting. Now there are some other stats that I can share. Um, there's this table that I have here. This table shows the number of damaged, destroyed, abandoned, crashed, sunk, unknowns, and captures for a few key categories of vehicles. So this is not all the vehicles I count, but this is air defense, armored recovery vehicles, engineering vehicles, artillery, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored fighting vehicles, APCs, and MRAPs. This is kind of all of the vehicles that kind of are relevant to the fighting, really. So I can show you the full list of vehicles that we track, and you'll see that a lot of these other types of vehicles are not as super interesting. Like there's radars, electronic warfare, surveillance, and communication equipment. There's airplanes, helicopters, drones, ships, boats. Those are all kind of interesting, but track they're not regular. Like losing an airplane is kind of a big deal, but it's not something that happens every day. So from that at a
You track
glance,
ships. What? When did this happen?
well,
I had no
I
idea.
track ones that sink. I don't
Oh,
track where they go.
I was just going to say, I feel good about the fact that I'm not the only person with a sunk category for things.
well, I'll have you know, multiple tanks have sunk. Okay.
I really appreciate that. Honestly, it's very funny to me that I now have a category for sunk. I've actually I was trying to figure out yesterday how I was going to start representing that on my statistics because I don't know if it's notable because it's only one, but still, it's very funny.
Yeah. Yeah. There's. Yeah. 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 It makes more sense when you list a boat as sunk than when you list T-72 as sunk. But we've had multiple tanks sink. One of them drove into water and just disappeared. One fell off a bridge and just went bye bye. I mean, another one drove into water and just kept on going. So, yeah, we've had multiple tanks sink. One of the tanks burst into flames and he drove directly into a lake. And I've talked to a bunch of people about this, and we can't decide if that was a good idea or a bad idea.
I was just gonna say, like, I I guess you can't stop, drop, and roll at that point. Like, what is the what is the general modus operandi for my tank's on fire and there's a lake right here? Do I drive it?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the correct procedure is, but he opted for lake, and the tank sunk. Like there was zero of the tank above the water anymore.
Did any of the people get out of the sunk tank, or
I don't
did
know.
all of the people? Oh, okay. Well then,
I don't know if they were in the tank when it went into the water. I think they may have bailed the
fair.
tank before it made it to the water.
Huh?
I think they bailed when it caught on fire. They're like, okay, bye. And then the driver was like, I'm gonna put her in full speed ahead into that lake and jump out.
Why that's so funny to me? But man, it is.
But yeah, so these are all the vehicle categories that we track. There's civilian vehicles. You know, this is another thing that people. I don't think that many people. I think it's actually a very small number of people. But some people are very confused by listing a vehicle as civilian. This is a this doesn't this category is not who owns the vehicle. This is the category of the type of vehicle. Like when we say a civilian vehicle, it doesn't mean it's owned by a civilian. It's just it's the type of the type is civilian. Like a tank is a like everyone knows like a tank is a type of vehicle. But then when we say civilian, everybody gets confused. Like I don't know. It like a civilian vehicle is like a Toyota Camry or like a Ford like F-150 or whatever. Like that's a civilian vehicle. It's a like a like a
Wait,
bus. The bus is a
you
civilian
raise a
vehicle.
you raise a really good point though. How many Toyotas are in your civilian vehicle lost category?
I have no idea. we don't track brand. We just track type.
Oh man, that was about to be the best marketing campaign ever. But anyways, go on.
Yeah. So this is these are all the categories. There is a unknown category which is actually rather large because there's a lot of vehicles that, particularly with helicopters and ATGMs, they have such low resolution. We have literally no clue what the vehicle is. And then there's the other category, which is just weird stuff. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, there was the Russians took a tractor and they added like like a wagon to the back, and they like armed the wagon like with a weapon. So it was like a weapon on a wagon attached to a tractor, right? So like how do you that went into other that's an other. It's a combat wagon, okay? That's what other means. And then there's decoy. So those are the categories. So but we have this kind of reduced version of just the important stuff. And where am I? I'm lost. This is for this is October. So these numbers are October. So this is like the big map. Or anyway, this isn't even the thing I meant to be showing. I'm confused again. Give me a second. Okay, I'm less confused now. This is November. These are the November stats. So we have I draw a little box around the destroyed ones of the ones we care about the most, which is artillery, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, AFVs, and APCs. These are the vehicles we care about the most because they're like the most military-ish of all of these. They're the ones that get used the most. They're the ones that get blown up the most. So I draw a box around to the destroyed just to bring your eyes to the numbers that matter the most, and you'll see that over the past month, by my stats, we have 64 pieces of artillery, 68 tanks, 90 IFVs, and 36 APCs. So that is quite a few for the Russians. Now, you might be wondering, how do I distinguish between damaged and destroyed? That's a good question, because okay, so the way that I count destroyed, because I am the only one who decides whether something is damaged or destroyed. Other people like have a say in all the other categories, but I'm the only one who determines damaged or destroyed. So like anyway, so it's kind of like a one man show in that respect. Like Gick and whatever, they help add the vehicles and locate them, etc. But I'm the only one who ultimately categorizes it. So my rule of thumb is that if I don't think it can be realistically repaired in the field, it's destroyed. Um, Typically, destroyed requires more evidence. Like you can think of destroyed as it exploded, it burst into flames, it fell into a river. Those are destroyed. Okay. Whereas damaged is kind of the other category. It's kind of like everything else category is damaged. I kind of wish we had a heavily damaged and lightly damaged differentiation, but we never did it, and I don't want to go back because it would ruin my life. Um, oh, this is the way it is. Damaged is basically if the vehicle is struck by a projectile that was not sufficient to destroy it, it's damaged. That's kind of the categories here. It's in one hand, it exploded into 1,000 pieces. That means it's destroyed. In the other hand, it was hit, and then it's damaged. If okay, with this damaged category, a bunch of the damaged vehicles are probably destroyed, and a whole lot of the damaged vehicles have superficial damage. And I want to make that clear. So a whole bunch of these damaged vehicles have superficial damage. So like they get hit, it's a solid hit, but it doesn't do any damage. That it would still count as damaged in the way we count things. And a whole bunch of these damaged things are probably destroyed because if it doesn't like catastrophically explode, I count it as damaged basically. So yeah. So there's a question. Are vehicle losses proportional to personnel losses? Uh, Probably. I have no idea. Probably though. I imagine. Uh, I do want to say that vehicle destruction, like vehicles getting destroyed, are a lot more survivable than you may think. We have seen vehicles literally explode into a million pieces, and then like the people inside like just walk away. It's bizarre. We've seen it happen. Like we've seen a vehicle hit a mine and blow in apart. Like the pieces of the vehicle are no longer connected. Like the welding fails and all the pieces go away. And then like half of the people get up and crawl over and start digging a trench. And they like dig a little trench and hide in the trench. Like that happens way more frequently than I ever expected to see personally. It actually makes me kind of think of like zombie movies when it happens. It's really weird. But these vehicles are more survivable than you probably think they are. Bizarrely. So yeah. So this is kind of all I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to talk about how the numbers, how do we get the data, which is mostly through Telegram. How do we analyze? How do we filter the data, which we got into? Uh, how do we determine? How do we label it, which I think I just described. So those are all the things I wanted to talk about. I didn't actually want to get into analysis of this stuff. Uh, I don't know. Does it make sense?
I think so. And I mean, I think the point would be that tracking the vehicle losses is what you have the data for. There isn't necessarily a lot of data to do analysis on things like how proportional are human losses versus vehicle losses, those types of things. We don't know those answers. Hopefully Ukraine does, but we don't even know if they do specifically. We do know that, like you said, certain vehicles are more survivable than other vehicles, and generally they are more survivable than I think the rest of us would have thought a year and a half ago. But yeah, doing more analysis than that is like, it really literally requires more data, or it's just not very accurate analysis. And it's better to just say, hey, we don't know the answers to those questions.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to give context to the numbers that I publish, because there's a lot of questions I get about it. There's one thing to say. I do track this, but I didn't make a data template that makes like a chart like this easily accessible to me. Although I do have the data and I could make a template for this. But people ask me, like, are the numbers of FPV drones going up or down? And I'm like, I don't know. The thing is that the way we get footage is through drones mostly. Like the vast majority of footage is through drones. And there's multiple types of drones. There's a recon drone, there's an attack drone, and then there is a battle assessment drone. And sometimes, the type of drone that fulfills each of those niches isn't so important, because sometimes you use an FPV drone as a recon drone. Sometimes you use an FPV drone as a battle assessment drone. And then obviously an FPV drone can attack. A Mavic can attack too. It can drop grenades or whatever. There's lots of, but at the end of the day, the footage that we get is almost always from a drone. Like the vast majority of the time. Sometimes we get footage of people driving past vehicles or walking past them. Those happen, but it's a minority. And sometimes we get footage from like a Stugna, because or whatever. But those are a minority. The vast majority of our footage comes from drones, and it happens to be that drones synergize with other drones very well. So drones working with drones is probably one of the most common things, really. Drones also can help artillery. A lot. We get so much footage of drones working with artillery, but that footage doesn't necessarily show vehicles. See, a lot of those is just shelling of a forest line, which we then try to geolocate and map. And on our map, we have a whole bunch of that. We have so much footage of just shelling. And if you look around, like we have these icons, and you can click it and view the shelling. And they're all filmed by drones, obviously. But the majority of the time, that shelling is not at a vehicle; it's at infantry. So we don't get anywhere near as many vehicle casualties from artillery, which is not to say it doesn't happen. It's just that we don't get it as often.
I think it's kind of important to say that, like, there is lots of people gathering lots of different pieces of information about this war, and each of them have caveats. And so what you see from Oryx is a very different data set than what you see from Andrew. And what you see from Andrew is obviously very clearly different than what the things that I track. But all of them can lead you to have a more complete picture of what's going on. But it's on you to kind of make sure that you're following each of those, because they aren't the same data sets, and you shouldn't be evaluating them the same way. You should look at each data set, understand what the caveats are for those data sets, and then pick out the trends that are applicable to whatever you're trying to understand about the war, because they are really important. They are just very separate, and they have different data sets. And so evaluating them based on those caveats is the important part, I guess.
Yeah. So we have one question, and then I'm going to end the stream because I covered the topic I wanted to cover. But we have one question for you, and it's what do you think of Russia's new naval drones, and why? No, I was going to say a joke, but that's the question.
I am reserving judgment on those. They're huge. So they're a very different type of drone than what we see Ukraine using on a regular basis. They're more like a small boat, and they have offensive combat capabilities. So, like, you might use them on a river to kind of take out a position with covering fire before you drop off somebody else in an actual boat that was following up, or same thing on a coastline. Or if you, let's say there were Ukrainian Marines trying to infiltrate some place on the coastline, maybe this drone boat would go attack them, those types of things. There are other options for use, but that was one of the main ones that I had kind of seen. And based on just the size of it and the look and feel of it, that's what I presume that they're kind of anticipating, because you couldn't sneak up with them anywhere. Like, they're a very different style and availability of mission, basically. So I guess I would just say, wait and see. Two things. Russia has had naval drones for a long time. We don't really see them using them, which means they're probably not that effective, or they haven't been able to make them operational in a way that they can actually use them in this particular conflict. So I guess wait until we actually see them somewhere being used, number one. And number two, then evaluate how effective they are at actually doing the job they've been assigned. And until we see either of those two things happen, I'm honestly just like keeping an eye on it, but not all that concerned about it, because quite frankly, they haven't had a very useful or effective naval drone program. And I'm not overly convinced that that's going to change just yet. However, like they have done with FPV drones and other types of drones, they have the capability to mobilize resources and like make change and make this effective. So at some point, I expect that there will be naval drones that Russia has that are useful. It's just that we haven't seen that actually happen yet. So until we actually do, I'm not sure that there's a whole bunch to concern ourselves with.
All right, so that's all. That's the stream for today. That's all I got. I just wanted to describe where my numbers come from and how, and that's all I wanted to do. So we did it. Mission accomplished. Thank you for everyone who came and listened. And if you see someone who asks, "What do these numbers mean?" you can send them this video. And that was the whole point. Okay, so goodbye, everybody.